Now, the pressure on the FAI increased yesterday after the Minister for Sport, Shane Ross, warned that the association may not be eligible for new large capital sports grants if its corporate governance is not in order.
Yeah, we're very, very concerned with what's happened in the last few weeks. And we're determined that absolutely no sporting body which hasn't got its corporate governance in order will get any grants from the government at all. That includes the freezing, which has already taken place, of the funds by Sport Ireland, but it also includes, maybe more importantly, the large-scale capital funds for which applications close on Wednesday. And let me just say absolutely categorically, there will be no money for sporting bodies whose corporate governance is not in order. And that includes, of course, specifically the FAI.
And join us with that story and everything else this morning is Ellen Gunning, Director of the Irish Academy of Public Relations. Ellen, from a pure perspective, how did the FAI bounce back from a crisis like this?
What I can't understand is either have they been given really bad advice or have they taken no advice at all? Because if you look at how they handled this crisis, they turned this crisis into an even bigger crisis, and that takes a huge amount of skill. The rule 101 in crisis, OK, is that you come out with your hands up. You've got something wrong. You come out and say, we've got it wrong, OK? Then you say, this is what we got wrong. This is how we think we got it wrong. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. This is how we're trying to fix it. The FAI went into the Oireachtas committee and said, here's what we can tell you. Now we're bringing down the shutters. On legal advice, we can tell you nothing about nothing, and nothing else that you want to know can be told either, and sat. I couldn't believe it. If they had actually gone in, they were in crisis going into that committee. I could not understand how they didn't go in and say, we got it wrong. We definitely got it wrong. Even if we didn't realise at the time that we shouldn't have taken this loan, that we should have accounted for it differently, when a journalist started to inquire about it, somebody somewhere on the board should have said, maybe we missed something. Maybe we should go back and look again. There was something we should have looked at. And I think we would all have had much more respect for them if they'd walked into that committee and said, we got it wrong for whatever reason. Here's how we think it happened, or here's how it happened. Now we need to figure out how we make sure it doesn't happen again. Because they went into a committee that was representing us. It's our money, it's taxpayers' money that goes to the FAI. And they are a major sponsor. And they treated them as if they were errant children who needed to be dealt with. We will tell you what we need to tell you and then we'll stop. And you should be happy. And it made the crisis much worse because you ended up with the Taoiseach saying we need answers to questions. Fergus O'Dowd, who chairs the committee, saying this isn't good enough. The Minister came out at the weekend and said, and that seems to be the stick that really has encouraged them to now see the error of their ways, because the Minister said not only has Sport Ireland suspended funding, but you may not apply for any major funding, while there's this whole question over the governance of the FAI. And apparently, I'm not big on sport now at all, but apparently they're looking to apply for 5 million for the Aviva, 10 million for some excellence centre in Cork. You're talking a huge amount of money at risk, and that seems to have focused the minds of the board on suddenly looking at corporate governance. It's long overdue. They should have been doing it a good while back.
Yeah, well, money talks, and when you start costing the organisation money and sponsorship, then the chances are you're probably dead in the water. It does. It was interesting. I was listening to a lot of the commentary over the weekend and listening to Eamon Dunphy in particular, and he made the point that it doesn't appear as if there's been any great larceny going on here, as if there's been any great crime. But what does appear to be the problem is, as you've outlined, is how they handled it, how they reacted to it, which made them look like there was something going on.
They actually made it look dodgy. It appears that it was 100,000. Now, I don't understand the 100,000 loan, OK? And I'm not a mathematician, and finance is definitely not my area. But this is an organisation that has a 50 million euro turnover. So 100,000 is 0.2% of the turnover that they needed for a loan. So being the sado that I am, I figured out that if you earn 24,000, this means that you really seriously needed 48 euros to keep you alive. The figures don't add up. The proportion is entirely wrong. But it appears that he lent them the money, they paid the money back, it solved a short-term problem. There was no interest paid on it. There was nothing underhand about it. They didn't account for it properly. Nobody seems to have thought it was straight. It should have flagged a bigger problem, that amount of money was needed to keep the FAI alive when it had that amount of turnover. And from a governance point of view, that's what the board should have been looking at. It's fine we survived that issue, but it should never have arisen.
Well, talking of survival, it looks highly unlikely now that John Delaney will survive. Word from people close to him is that he's tendered his resignation and the board of the FAI is going to consider it today. And I suppose that will be step one in cleaning up their shop, so to speak. Let's move on to something that I think would have upset an awful lot of people. I mean, we know that we have a two-tier, possibly even three-tier health system. But the idea that there is now a drug that will only be available to people who have health insurance and not to public patients is quite shocking. I mean, we probably know all of this, but to have it outlined for us as starkly as it was over the weekend, when you have people like John Crone saying that he has enormous difficulty with this, that he finds it very troubling, and that this week, he'll be talking to private and public patients, and he will be saying to one lot of patients, because they have insurance, that there is this drug available for you, and to another lot of patients, because they're public, that this is not. So you have money and you're comfortable and you have insurance, so you'll get better. You don't, so you could die. How do doctors, how are they supposed to do that?
It's morally completely wrong, isn't it? I mean, if you were a VHI patient, you would be saying, thank God I have VHI insurance. But you would not be jumping up and down saying, and amn't I the lucky bugger? You would actually be horrified that other people are not getting the same drug. You're talking about people's, either their lives or the quality of their lives. And no government can stand over a drug that might possibly improve, enhance the quality of your life, or give you a longer life, and say, because you have private insurance, you qualify. The thing that I think is most scary about this from a government point of view, when Sláinte Care was introduced and they brought in the Oireachtas committee, which was to look at the future of healthcare, its remit was to look at how you could introduce a single-tier health system that provided for people on the basis of medical need, not on their ability to pay. This completely turns it on its head. I think the Minister probably needs to get involved very quickly, and I think the Taoiseach probably needs to get involved because he is a medical doctor. We need to hear from them if this is their vision for the society that we want to live in, because I think if you ask people, this is not the vision. This is not the society we want to live in.
These are drugs that only if you're a public patient and you are very, very sick will you get. Like, it's outrageous that you have to be at stage 4 cancer before you can get what someone in the early stages of cancer will get as a private patient.
But the really strange thing is that it will apply to a very, very small number of people anyway, because I think it was Avril Power from the Cancer Society who said not all drugs suit everybody. So there are a small number of people this drug will work for, or these two drugs will work for. The idea that you would deprive this small number of people of these drugs, it's immoral. Yeah. It's absolutely immoral.
Speaking of immorality, the words poor and poverty get bandied about a lot, and it's kind of hard to know what the definition of it is, but the CSO have given us a definition, and they've also, with that definition, said that 1 in 6 people in Ireland are living on income below the poverty line. The poverty line is, for one adult, €13,000 per annum.
I was really shocked.
For one adult and one child, it's 17,500. For one adult and 2 children, it's 22,000. And for 2 adults and 2 children, it's 26,000. Now, that's the poverty line, according to the Central Statistics Office. And by the way, this isn't state benefits. There are working families whose income this is.
Out of the 750,000 people, or 760,000, I think it is, who are living on the poverty line, 110,000 are working parents. So they're working and they can't survive. The figures are incredibly low. To think that we've 750,000 people who are living on something between 13,000 and 30,000, depending on whether you're single or married with 2 children, is really scary. The idea that people cannot cope with, and the definition of poverty is that you cannot cope with the most minor crisis. So something like an electricity bill which is higher, or a fridge that needs to be replaced, suddenly becomes a major issue. You cannot actually cope with it. It's quite terrifying.
These incomes that we gave there, by the way, are incomes after tax and welfare receipts, but before housing costs have been met.
And housing costs...
So this is what you have before you put a roof over your head.
Single person, €13,000. How are you going to put a roof over your head? It's just not possible. I don't know how people are surviving at all on that kind of money.
Well, the answer is that they're not.
They're not.
Ellen, thank you very much for that.
Nice to see you. OK, plenty more to come on the show. We'll be back after the break.